Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the interview. LA edition. Today, I have a good friend of mine and man, a rare breed, should I say. Mr. Josh Thompson, man. Thanks for coming through, bro. I appreciate you, dog.
Hey, thanks for having me, Keith. Appreciate you.
Yeah, man, it's an honor today. Um, man, it just I was able just to see you recently, and I'm glad that we was able to connect recently because now it's like it brought it back to me like, man, me and him we need to chat. We got to have a discussion.
Hey, well, you put me on the spot today,
Nah, definitely, man. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Let's just tell people who you are and what you do.
man. All right. Well, my name is Josh Thompson. I also go by my stage name J Quality. So that's not J Quality, it's J Quality. Because J is my first initial, T is my last initial, and quality experiences are what I provide as a musician. So I'm a professional saxophonist, producer. I also am a digital producer as well. And so I've been playing for, well over 20 years. I've been playing the sax since, I was like 6 years old. And for me, I just had a rewarding career, both as an instrumentalist, as a writer, as an arranger, still learning, still growing, been able to work with both major and independent artists. In addition to, creating my own production company and digital series, which I'll, talk about a little bit later. But, at 32 years old, I have to say, like, I'm just getting started, but still just experiencing just the journey of being an entrepreneur, and at the same time being a servant leader.
Yeah, man. And I've had the pleasure of knowing you since college.
Yeah,
So
man. Matador, see son all day.
yeah, and you mentioned you're a saxophonist, and I've been seeing you wear that saxophone. I mean, not just as a musician, but really as a badge of honor. And I've always thought it was so cool because it was so unique in such a place where instruments are not as hot as they used to be.
Mm.
But you make it look cool, man. Like, oh man, like
I'm trying, man. I think what's dope about it is that I just have a just rounded background. I've been doing music all my life. I grew up in the church. I actually started playing drums when I was a kid. But then, you know, I wanted to be able to play an instrument that, just kind of like made me stand out a little more. So I went through a whole bunch of instruments like clarinet, trombone, guitar, cello, you name it.
mm,
But when I touched the saxophone, I felt like that was really God just really telling me like that was the instrument that was for me. It just fit. And so I just naturally just, begin to stick with it, man. And for me, I'm formally trained. So all throughout school was been trained privately, learning classical music, was in beginning band, symphonic band, pretty much any band you could possibly think of. And then like really when I got to high school, and I come all the way from was originally born in Merced, California, but then when my mom remarried, we ended up moving out there to Lancaster. And when I was there at Corso High School, that's when I really started taking my music career seriously. I was a drum major, I was in a marching band.
so wait, hold
Oh
on. I
yeah,
don't. I want to
go
get
ahead,
into that because I
go
like
ahead,
I
go
like where
ahead,
you're going, and
go
and
ahead.
we right in the pocket.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your childhood a little bit. You said that you were born
Okay.
in Merced,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, for people who don't know about Merced,
So that's essential. That's like the Central Valley. Like that's very
it's like right outside of Fresno. I'm
right outside. Yeah, right outside
okay.
of Fresno. Very very small town. I mean, I didn't really spend too much time in there that I would even remember because I was a kid. But I went to school, elementary school in Fresno,
Okay.
and then when my mom divorced, my mom and dad divorced, then she remarried, and then my stepdad, he was out as the superintendent for the Palmdale School District, well, assistant
Oh,
superintendent for the
nice.
Palmdale School District. And so, we went out there. And for me, moving around a lot as a kid, sometimes I envy people who's just like, yeah, like me and so and so been being friends since the sandbox. You know what
Right,
I'm
right.
saying? Like, I didn't necessarily get that.
Yeah, same
But,
here.
what I do appreciate though is that the times that I did spend for a significant amount of my life, in, being able to make connections that, I can say today that like have lasted, the test of time. Like literally, like just 2 weeks ago, I got to see my good friend Joshua Crumbly, who is a world renowned bassist. And as kids, like we already knew in high school, like he was
Is
a
that guy,
prodigy.
right?
His dad was my very first mentor on the sax. And he's been traveling the world like ever since.
So let me ask. So
Yeah.
you met him like in Lancaster, or you met him in Merced?
In Lancaster.
Okay, so let me ask you about this, 'cause I want to get a little personal, a little bit about that, because you
Mhm,
mentioned that it was you and your mother, and then she divorced, and then it was your stepfather.
mhm.
What was that process like for you? Was it something that were you able to maintain a relationship with your father? Did it?
Mm.
Because I want to get into the root of you, because that's going to explain where you are today. So how was that transition for you when your parents separated?
I mean, for me, I was very young. I think I couldn't have been more than like 4 or 5 years old, when my mom, finally decided to leave. I mean, and it's a whole, it's literally just a whole nother segment, even just for that. But, I had to say it was me, it was my younger brother, but I also have an older sister, but at the time she was much older, and
Mhm.
she was living in Baltimore at the time. So for me, assuming the role of the oldest, it was a lot of there was a lot of pressure with that. And
I mean, like, were you able to maintain a relationship with your father?
For a
The
while,
distance?
for a while, no, for a while, no.
How old were you when your parents separated?
I think I couldn't have been like more than 4 or 5. The older I
Okay.
get, the more that the more that the years kind of like gel together. But I mean,
Right.
it was some significant time. I mean, it was still like how you had the conjugal visits when you're a kid. You know
Mhm.
what I'm saying? But I went through that. But at the same time, now that I'm older, a lot of those things that would have normally, I could have let held me back, as a young man. A lot of those things I've been able to actually like deal with that, just deal with that and process that in a much healthier way.
Yeah, I experienced the same thing, man. My parents split early on when I was young, and
Mhm,
then now my mother's with my stepfather, which I absolutely adore.
mhm.
How was your relationship with your stepfather? Was it hard to have one, or was it easy to transition to having a new person in that role?
It's definitely hard because, especially when, you're a young adolescent, you're trying to do your absolute best in school. Like both of my parents were educators. So
Okay.
they definitely were pressing on the need for, getting a great education. And for me, I was kind of like, I grew up with the golden child syndrome,
Hmm.
how always having to do well.
Hmm.
So for me, it was a process of just needing to adjust and realizing that the man that was now in my life that was taking the role of my father, that he wasn't doing it because he had to, he was doing it because he wanted to. Like one of the things he always tells me is that, when he met my mom, like one of the things that was a non-negotiable for him was accepting, myself and my younger brother, and then also my sister, like as his own kids,
Right.
because he went through his own experiences. But, when I look back on, kind of like, as a young adolescent, kind of like the hell that I put him through,
Hmm.
you know what I'm saying? Like if I look at myself now, I'd have been like, girl, you're like, you tripping. But, honestly, I would say like now, even in my 30s, like I have one of the best, relationships, with my father. Just because, he really stepped in and he took that role.
So
You
what,
know,
what about your biological father? How's your relationship with him?
So, I have to be, completely honest, and it depends on it depends on who sees this, but I got to speak my truth just
Of
because I'm a
course.
grown man. So for me, during the pandemic, my biological father actually reached out. And for me, it was definitely a shock, but everything was going crazy. The world was turned upside down.
Right.
But before I even went into that process of dealing with that, I did call, my stepdad, and I had a conversation with him. And that was the thing that helped me to be able to even prepare myself to go through that. Because when I called him and I told him about it, he was just like, honestly, he was like, you know, um, I always knew this day would come. And the reason why I've raised you the way that I've raised you is so that you could get to this point. And then that's kind of like when the light bulb, switched on for me. Um, and I realized that in order to get into this next phase of my life, I had to be willing to, face the very thing that um, it hadn't necessarily held me back, but at the same time, you know what it's like when you're carrying extra baggage
Yeah.
and it's like not, and you trying to fit extra clothes to the bag and it's not fitting and it's weighing you down,
Mhm.
and it's crazy because, I went to a worship conference because again, I've been in the church all my life and I play at play in the worship team at my church, Antioch Church of Long Beach. And we went to a conference in 2018 and I got a chance to see this pastor by the name of Darius Daniels. He's actually one of my favorites. And he was, coming from like the book of Job, and he was, really expounding on it in a way that, I had never heard before. But for me in that moment, it was just like, yo, I'm like on my face, boohoo crying. But immediately I was just like, I asked God, I was like, this thing that has always like weighed me down, the pressure of wanting to be an outstanding black male, always holding myself to a higher standard, but also wanting to control my narrative of, trying to live a good and upstanding life, but at the same time not wanting to make the same mistakes as my dad. I had to get rid of that narrative because if I continued to hold that narrative in my 30s and not actually, quote unquote, face my demons in dealing with that, then I would have allowed my ego to rob myself of the healing that I experienced. So, we were able to, connect and have a conversation. And, just for me, I don't expect anybody, within my, that's in my life, to do the same thing that I did because it's different strokes for different folks. But I just know what I needed to do for me. And it was liberating for me, to come into my next, um, and just be in a space of just healing, man. So sorry, I kind of went on about that,
No,
but it's
no,
just
that's
like it's one of
cool.
those things I'm still like
Right, right. You're
processing,
still going through it because I
Yeah.
mean, you said during the pandemic, which was basically last year, essentially when it kind of took the tail end of it. So, and I asked that question because I think that's important because I think there's something there that has to do with who you are today. Well, a lot of it
Yeah.
because now you're still like you're still going through it.
Mhm.
Do you feel like that experience is what pushed you into the music? Or do you feel like that has anything to do with you being a career musician now?
Absolutely, man. I mean, for me, growing up, my mom was in the choir. I said before, I grew up in the church, and music was a safe space for me.
Mhm.
So anything that I could possibly like do within that creative space, and I also play basketball, but I
Right.
just didn't, and I was good, but I didn't stick with it just because it didn't give me the same I would have to say just the internal validation and the
Mhm.
internal just joy that I felt like I have pure joy being a musician. As hard as I work even today, I understand that it's deeper than my talent. I actually have the gift of being able to heal. And I think that very few people will be willing are willing to are able to experience this if you're not able to put yourself in spaces where you're actually able to help people heal. I could, say, hey, I'm touring all over the world for the majority of my life. Like some musicians and friends that I know, like they've never set foot inside of a studio because they've always been touring, or
Right.
it's the absolute opposite. They are amazing producers, but they've never really been about the tour life.
Mhm.
But I always just thank God for those incremental moments where someone calls me and they say, hey, like, we're celebrating, 10 years of marriage. That's an accomplishment. Or saying,
Yeah.
hey, I'm proposing to, the love of my life.
Yeah.
And or, just most recently what I've been experiencing is, needing to play when somebody loses a loved one.
Yeah.
So when I think about those moments in the times that people have called on me specifically, I thank God for those moments because you really learn a lot about yourself. You really learn a lot about other people, but you also learn more importantly about your purpose and your assignment.
Man, as you saying that, I'm sitting there thinking like, yo, like the weight you carry from having that ability is major. I just realized like you are responsible for curating the way people feel. To
Yeah.
you create the environment, and us being both, I guess you could say, audio inclined, right?
Yeah.
I understand what sound does for
Absolutely.
people, and the way you can create with the instrument of choice that you've chosen is. Now I'm thinking about it because I've seen you in action
Mhm.
a multitude of times over since our relationship over the years, and man, play important parts in people's experience that are, what's the word I want to use? Um, like benchmarks,
Mm.
like memorable moments. You are responsible for memorable moments, which is huge weight. So man, hats off to you because I didn't really think about how important that was outside of just you're a good saxophonist. Like, no, you're responsible for people's life moments.
I appreciate that because a lot of times even I have to take a step back and think about that and think about it from that perspective because a lot of times we can be so as musicians and as creatives, we can be so just enamored with all right getting to the next gig or what's coming, what's going on tomorrow, what's going on the next day, or making sure that we are being consistent in our art as opposed to just kind of slowing down and realizing the responsibility that we have
Yeah.
in a moment. My good friend Wiley always says is like, what does it look like to just master today and the responsibility that you have for today? So I appreciate that perspective
Yeah.
because it keeps me humble, and it's a constant reminder to stay grounded in those moments, even when for myself, when I'm feeling tired, when I'm feeling worn out, that there is a responsibility, to being able to help people be able to process certain emotions. Just like you said, like just this
Yeah.
past weekend, working with Chef Beans and the Transparency series, you know, for one person, it can be like, oh, I'm just playing a cover of this song, da 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 da, or I'm playing this hit that everybody knows. But really, is what I was telling, folks that night. It's everybody has a playlist. So it's being able to steward the moment correctly and being able to take
Mm.
people to a place of not just nostalgia, but also just understanding and being able to, get more in tune, with their emotions. Because, again, like I said, we're healers in a lot of different ways.
No, and music is one of the most man, it's one of the most healing tools that exists on God's green earth. I wanna talk about the process up to you picking up the saxophone because
Cool.
we talked a little bit earlier about you went through so many instruments. What was the first instrument you picked up?
Oh, it was definitely drums, bro.
Okay,
It
so
was definitely
this was
drums.
in church or was it in school?
This was in church, and then because I wanted to play in church, I just naturally picked it up at school as well.
Okay, so and
So,
this was how old were you when you?
shoot, man, I mean, I was in grade school, so I'm like, it could have been like I think like 3rd, 4th grade, like 3rd, 4th grade,
Right,
like
right,
I was
right,
in
right,
it.
right. When everybody got when you right, everybody gotta have that class,
Yeah,
right? My daughter
yeah.
played the clarinet. So you go from drums and then you move on to what was the next instrument?
Shoot, it was piano. I stuck with that for a little, for a little bit, but
Nice.
anybody will tell you that it takes a lot of patience and it takes a lot of discipline. And drums was just more fun for me. Just like I didn't like to be bored easily.
Right, right,
Like literally, teachers thought I had ADD just because I finished like my work before everybody else,
right,
and I would just start tapping with my pencils and making
right,
beats and
right,
stuff like that. And they're just like, "Oh, he must have ADD." It's like, nah,
right,
like I just needed a challenge.
right, right, right. So you go from drums, piano, that was one of my that's one of my instruments. I was like, oh, man, if I can do anything, I would play the piano, man. But then you go on to what was after that?
Shoot. After that was I tried the trombone for a little bit. I tried the clarinet for a
The
little
trombone
bit.
is just uncool. It's just an
It's
uncool
just,
instrument.
and then I
I
just,
mean, shout out to those who play the trombone, but
yeah,
it's just big.
yeah.
It's
It's
a
just,
big item.
but you know what? There are very few that can really, really make it sing. Like one
Yeah.
of my favorite players to actually play with, like here in LA, is his name is Christian. And boy, if you look him up on Instagram, his IG is crazy for chords, and he's just all over the place, man. Like
Yeah.
he's a musician's musician,
See,
bro.
when we become adults, like even now in my car, as soon as you get in my car, I always have 91.5 it on.
Okay.
I always classical music is just what I prefer, right?
Uh huh.
as you get older, you start appreciating the instruments. You start understanding things on a deeper level. So
Yeah.
I can see now I could appreciate the trombone, but back in like high school, it just wasn't cool, right?
Right.
So okay, so you go to the trombone, and then you move on to
I moved on at that point. I moved on to, I think it was the clarinet. I didn't stick with that for long, and then that was when I think like after that, then I picked up the saxophone because I think that was the only thing left, and I
right
needed to be consistent with
outside
some.
that
And I
the
did.
flute. You can't play the flute, right? You
Nah, nah, nah,
got
nah. But I will say though, like
uh-huh,
later on, like when I was in high school, once I joined the jazz band,
uh-huh.
I had to double on flute. And
Okay,
so as I started learning about, just more about Latin jazz, uh, more about world music, you start realizing that
the flute is
you start realizing kind of like the stigmas behind these things.
uh
Like they only exist in our head, in our
yeah.
heads, or based on what other
It's
people
not
have,
seen as a masculine instrument, so
right.
that's why usually you know dudes stay away from it. But it's one of the most impressive pieces of equipment
Yes,
ever.
sir. Yes,
I'm
sir.
surprised because you say the saxophone. I was really thinking you were going to go with the trumpet because it seems like the
Mm.
same breathing type of thing. I don't know. I just thought you were going to go there.
To a degree, it's just I mean, similar breathing,
Uh huh.
but just a different brass instrument. But it's funny because I've never actually picked up the trumpet like in my life,
Right. So
and it
all
was probably because of like how I didn't like the just dealing with the trombone. I was just
right,
like,
right. It's like the same thing, right? Um. So how many of those instruments can you still play?
So
Like fluently, like not like you can. I can get up here and I can perform with you.
Yeah, so I can still, I mean, obviously I can play, all the saxes. I can still play flute. I can still play drums.
Mhm.
And I'm still a little rusty on keys, but I'm relearning.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice, man. I'm trying to pick up a guitar one day or something like that, man. I don't know. I want to sing over an instrument. I feel like I can do it, but probably not.
Mhm.
but okay. So you pick up a saxophone. How old were you when you picked up the saxophone
Shoot,
first?
that was, um, I believe I was like about 6 years old. 6 years,
Six.
six, yeah,
Wow.
6.
Wow. Okay. So you pick up the saxophone and you say, "This is it." Like, was there a particular moment? Was it like something that happened, or like what made you say, this is my instrument. This is the one I'm going to stick with."
Um, for me, again, it was just really just a feeling of just, I don't know, it was just a different energy. Again, it was like unique. I had gone through all of these different instruments, within grade school, and as I continued to work with it, I just kept I kept coming back to it because one of the things that you kind of don't really have now that we had back then in the 90s is there was a lot more freedom, and you had a lot more, there were a lot more programs where you went from this and this to other. So
Right.
you might be playing the drums one week, but then you might be playing a different instrument the
For
next
sure.
week. So for me, that instrument, I ended up coming back to that, and I just felt like that was just like, it just gave me a different kind of energy. It gave me a different kind of distinct, just a distinct flavor, just like when I would be in band class. And by the time I finished grade school, that was the instrument I wanted. That was the instrument I wanted to
You was
play.
moving forward
Yeah.
because a lot of people don't make it out of grade school, even middle school, sticking with an instrument. Because I played drums, I played drums, I think I played was it the trumpet a little bit, like I think I
Mhm,
for like a week or something, and then I was like, "Oh,
mhm,
okay, well, I'm done with this." And I tried to stick with the drums a little bit, but didn't make it.
mhm.
Um, so like the interesting thing is you don't have a musical background in your family, right? Or do
No,
you?
no, I don't.
So what was it that like attached you? Was it a love for music? Was it something that you found spiritually within it? Was it like I'm trying to figure out something tangible
Yeah.
that like grabbed you and kept
Um,
you with it?
let me see. I mean, honestly, if I can be completely honest, it would have to be just the fact that, my mom was always singing. And, even through everything that she went through in her life and trying to, raise, two young black boys, especially before my, stepfather came into life and, came into my life. And, she was a single mom. You
Mhm,
know what I'm saying? Like in all the things she went through, she was always singing. She was always thanking God.
mhm.
And I think for me, um, the fact that she was always singing, music was a constant thing in the car. It was a constant thing in the house. She was always playing like the Kirk Franklin tape. She was always playing, the Mississippi Mass Choir. And so naturally, this got into my system.
Yeah.
And so as a musician, as a young kid, I was just like, I wonder how I can get to this level. I
Mm.
wonder how I can, just play something just to make people happy because even when she, with everything that she was going through, um, just I wanted to get to a point where I was like, yo, I hope that I can do something to make her happy. Like the music that she sings, I hope that I can play the same type of music or at least or even better
Give her
to bring
something
that
to
same
sing to.
happiness. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. And then I think also just the fact that as I continue to play in church, and as I continue to grow, it was just receiving, just the spiritual affirmations of of my gift. Because when you're a kid and you're growing up and you're playing drums in church, a lot of times that's the most popular instrument.
Right. That's what
It's the
everybody want to
most
play.
popular
Right.
instrument. So for me, I was just like, you know what? Not in a sense of like, and competition is healthy, but I was just like, you know what? I just felt something, pulled more. I felt that I needed to really give my all into the sax. And it's what allowed me, going into, even going into middle school, high school. By the time I graduated, I had already done like my first like album for my senior project.
Wow.
And so I
Was
recognized
it all original music or was it
so it was I did one original so I did it's funny because it's like there's so many years where I didn't talk about it.
right?
But it was original arrangements, but most of these were gospel were gospel standards with the exception of one song that I literally kind of like just came up with like on the spot. And as a kid like coming, in high school it's like you don't know everything there is to know about music theory. You don't know
Right.
everything there is to know about harmony. You learn the majority of this stuff in college, but I knew I knew theory. I knew, just sound and just cohesiveness, but I also knew how to create, just a good moment. You know what I'm saying? In a moment that feels good musically.
You know, early on, I grew up in the church as well. My mother is a big Christian. She's a woman of faith, and I've never seen a saxophone player in church.
Yeah, it's
So
it's a rare it's a rare thing, man.
right. So did you like see somebody in church, or did you just say I'm going to add this to what's already been done? Because like I know because you mentioned
Mhm.
church and you
Yeah,
mentioned how that has. I think people who grow up in church and that always has an effect on the music, right? Because
mhm,
it's such a part of what happens. So it goes on at church,
yeah,
especially in the black church. We ain't leaving without no music, no good
yeah,
music, right? We ain't
at
leaving without
all,
no good music,
at
right?
all, at all.
So, like, do you find yourself being? Do you understand like that you're rare, or do you? It doesn't dawn on you that
I understand that I understand that I'm rare. Sometimes that can come with again like certain it can come on with certain stigmas because it's a rare thing and because it's not seen and because people are not necessarily as used to it or familiar with it. It's like this thing that's like this it's this anomaly. It's this
you have
anomaly.
100%.
But it depends on being intentional with your music. And that's just because people have to be more aware. I don't want to call people ignorant, but I'm like people need to grow their awareness of
Mhm.
just how, developed, the saxophone is even outside of just jazz
I was about to
music.
say that because the only time I think of saxophone being applied to any place
Hmm.
in music is jazz, but here you are applying it to gospel,
Hmm.
R&B, hip hop. I've seen you do so many things to where I don't think I've ever seen you do jazz.
Yeah, no, no, it's crazy, and I still do, and I still do jazz. I
Right.
still do jazz. It's still one of my main tenets. It's just how it's interpreted. One of my biggest influences, honestly, that really, inspired me, to one do that album at 16, and but number two to really, take my career seriously, was Kirk Whalum. So Kirk Whalum is one of the renowned saxophonists. If you've ever heard of Whitney Houston, I Will Always Love You,
Of
that was
course.
the sax solo that was heard around the world.
Mhm.
And there's an amazing story behind that. But, for someone who was, a jazz saxophonist, to someone who was a soul R&B saxophonist, was really just, making headway, in the 80s and the 90s. Like I swear, if you listen to a lot of the records, from the 80s and the 90s that had saxophone players, you'll hear Kirk Whalum, you'll hear Gerald Albright, you'll hear Kim Waters, you'll hear these guys that a lot of people, like, unless you're a jazz, you're on the jazz circuit or the smooth
Right.
jazz circuit, that you'll hear about. But a lot of those songs, were accented and accentuated by these players. So,
Right.
when he came out with his Gospel According to Jazz series, I had never heard. And he had done, a couple other records beforehand. He did Hymns in the Garden, but when I heard the Gospel According to Jazz Chapter 2, that album changed my
Now,
life.
see, from a person who doesn't know, like, obviously the saxophone, which most people
Mhm.
don't, we hear it, and but you're hearing sounds. You're like, yo, he ripping that thing, right? And then we don't
Yeah.
even know. We think like, oh, he's good, but we don't know the spectrum of a jazz person that's like super excellent versus somebody who's mediocre, right?
Mhm.
So you're hearing it with a whole different ear. You're like, yo, this dude is killing it, right? So
Mhm.
that leads me to my question, like, what's the hardest part about playing a saxophone?
Mm, well, it depends on. I think it depends on what type of player, you are, and the type of player that you want to be. There are some guys that, will tell you, the hardest thing about being a saxophonist, if they're in, straight ahead, straight jazz head, they'll, tell you, oh, it's dexterity, it's learning, it's learning different tunes, it's, harmony, this, that, and the third, music theory, whatever. Um, and then, for some people, it's, just learning songs. I think for me, the hardest thing about being a saxophonist is I think being authentically you, because there are so many people that want to play like Charlie Parker. There's so many people that want to play like John Coltrane. There's so many people, that want to play like Michael Brecker. These are all, again, like giants, within jazz history and within the industry. And it's like, it's being authentically you. It's, really sitting down and finding your tone. It's finding your rhythm, finding the way in which you interpret music. Nobody knows, your soul better than you do. And that music is an expression of that. So
Right.
why spend so much time trying to, it's like, yes, you do, you borrow, we stand on the shoulders of these greats.
Of course, everyone.
So it's okay to borrow and understand the language.
Mhm.
I think it's extremely important that if you really want to be a well-trained musician, that you just not only listen to the music, but you understand the language and you understand how to speak it. Because, like we were talking about before, it's like sometimes you have to write things in a certain language in order for it to be understood.
Right.
So if you're gonna play jazz, you got to write it. You have to play in a language that can be understood. If
Right.
you're gonna play gospel, you have to play it in a language that's going to be understood. If you're gonna play rock and roll, Latin, so on and so forth, you have to be able to understand those
Right.
languages.
Because it's so different. And kind of leading to the question I want to ask next is, when you are playing, let's say, a cover song,
Mhm.
do you just kind of freestyle it because you're that nice, or do you like have the music already there, or are you just like kind of feeling it as you go?
Um, I would have to say that I try not to approach every song the same. Yeah, I know the verse, I know the hook, all these songs. I've played these songs over and over again. And honestly, like I'm a human jukebox when it
Right.
comes to cover songs. But um the saxophone is the closest thing that you may come that anybody may find to the human voice.
Hmm.
So I try to always play it in a way, that is expressive. I try to play as if I'm the lead vocalist and I'm having a conversation. Sometimes you don't need to do, a whole bunch of runs. Sometimes you don't need to, go up into your altissimo register just to say play how well you can play. I mean, if I'm feeling that way and I'm just like, yo, like I'm expressing myself and I really feel it, I'm gonna get on up there and I'm gonna go for blood. But sometimes it's just resting on just like one note. Sometimes it's just, just finding your way, to resolve and to create tension. That's all music is. It is
Yeah.
tension and resolution. Like,
Hmm.
so did that. I hope that answers your question.
No, because I'm curious to know, like, are you is you the type of person that's sitting down writing notes? Because I know, musicians, singers, people who play the piano. And I've seen you play, and a lot of times you got your eyes closed. So
Yeah.
I'm sitting there, I'm like, is he even? Is he? I don't even know if he's. I think he just feeling. I think he just doing his thing. To me, it seemed like you just going along with it. It's like I could put on. I feel like I wonder if I put on any song, could he rock to it?
Yeah, it's different if I'm on stage. When if I'm on stage and I got one light on me and it's completely dark, I'm definitely closing my eyes because it's
Right.
already like super bright. I can't see nobody.
Right.
It's better for me to feel and to be present in that moment. For me, again, learning these cover songs, it's not just learning the hook in the in the verse and the bridge and so forth. It's also making sure, like, all right, I'm still putting my music theory hat on. I'm
Mhm.
still, in my head, knowing what chord is coming next, or
Right.
a different way to approach it.
But you're not
You
actually
know,
looking at music notes to
nope.
learn it. You
Mm-mm,
so
mm-mm,
oh, you there. Okay.
mm-mm, mm-mm,
He said, I
mm-mm.
don't write then I just go on
If
the
I
boost, son.
or I mean, there's some people that I mean, I don't have perfect pitch. There's some people that literally they can
Right.
hear a chord and they can be like, "Oh, yo, that's
Right.
a minor seven flat five," or
Uh-huh.
that's that's a sus chord.
Right.
For me, if I'm hearing a song, or even if it's a song that I've played before, if I want to be able to approach it differently, I will still sit down and I'll just be like, "All right, so." That's where the hook. That's where the hook is. That's where the bridge is, and these are the chords, so that I can register for
Right.
myself how I can approach it next time.
But you don't
You know?
need the actual music
No,
notes to play.
no,
You can just hear it and then feel it and then go at it.
exactly.
Now that's pretty impressive right there because I feel like I could put so if it's a song you haven't played ever, but you're familiar with the song, you can play, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. It's a kind of a thing where we do this with one of the platforms I play for, Soulful of Noise. We always have this analog versus digital before every show, and it's the DJ versus it's DJ versus the band.
Right.
And I'll say, like, I have to say, like, I have like a 90% win record. Like my like shooting from the outside, like, bro,
Right.
like, I'm wet. You know what I'm saying? Like, straight
Right.
up. Like, so that gives me an opportunity to hear a song and say, like, okay, I just need to hear the hook. If I can hear the hook and I can hear the progression,
Right.
then I'm pretty much sure,
I'm
like,
in.
I know exactly, because everything we hear today has already been repeated.
Yeah, for sure. Right. It's the same beat. It's the same. Most times it's the same beats per piece per second or
Yep.
whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Has there ever been a time where you felt like, or even if you did, like I'm putting the sax down. Like I don't want to do this no more.
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely, bro. I would have to say, like, 2018 was definitely the year that I, almost gave up. And that was just because that was a very, very challenging year for me. So I didn't talk about this before, but you did mention it. We were in school, and yeah, I was still playing while I was in school, but I wasn't really pursuing it. I wasn't pursuing being in the industry just as heavy as I am now,
Well,
because
you,
I
you
was
I know you too busy being a Kappa, man. In college, you know.
it was that. It was, being in the black clubs and orgs. I was a
Right.
political science major. I wanted to go to law school. I wanted to go
Right.
to entertainment law. Just because, again, a lot of times when you're doing something creative, but you come from a background where you don't really have a frame of reference as to, how to really push yourself in the place that where you're meant to be, but you feel like, okay, well, you need to get your degree, you need to go
Mhm.
and get a high paying job and so forth. You kind of put that down, for a more, a realistic, type of just
Career, yeah,
environment and
yeah.
career. But everything comes full circle. So let me go back to 2018. So 2018, I was working at a law firm in Irvine. Shoot, $60,000 a year job. Working great. You know what I'm saying? Making great money as a legal assistant. Literally, I got that job um, no less than like 48 hours after I applied, simply because the knowledge that I had as a legal assistant, just as far as just discovery and processing and just legal, administrative tasks. Most attorneys don't even learn this until after they have already, gone off to law school. And then now they're, applying for a job. So most of the stuff I already learned exactly, what the process was. So I was, a bit ahead of the game. And that was just because I worked for an attorney, like, while I was, in my latter part of, college. So I'm working at this job and, I'm experiencing just fatigue just because at the time I was, MDing for a platform, all the way out in Hollywood. We were doing, a show every single week. So imagine going all the way from Irvine, every Tuesday trying to, get to Hollywood by 7 o'clock.
Nasty,
Absolutely insane.
nasty.
Absolutely insane. So, that summer, I actually got an opportunity through a good friend by the name of Monty Matthews. At the time, she was, building her brand within sync licensing, and she was working with Rostrum Records at the time. And so they were doing an album called Top Shelf 1988. And just a little bit background about that album. That was, an album that was made in the 80s. I mean, you had the Jungle Brothers, you had Dougie Fresh, you had Biz Markie, you had Big Daddy Kane, all these artists that created this compilation. And then the masters were lost because of like a bombing that happened out in Japan or something like that.
Wow.
So then the masters were recovered. And so she called me and she was like, hey, would you be down to, put some horn parts to this song? I said, like, absolutely. So that was in the summer of July. I'll never forget it. So I'm happy as hell to, actually, I'm like, yo, like I get to actually put down horn lines, and I didn't know what I was getting into until I got into the studio and they just gave me the down horn lines between like all of these different artists. I'm like, it's crazy because, a lot of times when you listen to West Coast rap, and then when you listen to East Coast hip hop, like the boom bap and then the horns are a big thing for a lot of these songs. So long story short, I get up in there, working with the producer, I lay these songs down, and that same day I have a show. So look, yo, I'm getting ready. I'm like, all right, let me go to the Burberry Mall. I'm about to get a fresh shirt. At the time, I'm with Soulful of Noise. We are at the US Bank building. So we're at the top floor. So I'm like, yo, let me make sure I get this shirt. Boom, like, and head to the show. Somebody hits my car, like literally, like coming out. And if you're ever in Burbank, it's a lot of corporate spaces there. So somebody hits my car, and so I'm calling AAA trying to get someone to hit my car. Nobody. So I have to Uber all the way to downtown LA to still do a show while my car is on the side parked. And, after the show, I still have to Uber back. I'm in my car. It's about like 1:30 in the morning. I think I waited like an hour and some change. Triple A finally comes, gets my car. I'm like, all right, fine. I'm like, I got to go to work the next day. Go to work the next day. My boss literally says, okay, hey, when you get settled in your office, come see me. At that moment, for some reason, I was like, I knew what was up. They let me go that day. So literally the day after doing like the one of the most like the biggest opportunities at that time for me as a saxophonist and as a musician and as a writer, I got let go the next day. And literally, but that summer, like I didn't have to worry about money because I ended up having just more gigs and Soulful and
Right,
Noise was
right.
picking up. But also that same summer, getting to the point of what made me almost want to quit is that literally a week after I did the Long Beach Jazz Festival, I was interning for an executive at the time, just helping them with, just some administrative stuff. Somebody breaks into the rental car that I was driving because at the time my car was totaled
Right.
and I had already,
It
maxed out
was
my
over.
credit cards.
Right.
They stole my sax out the car, bro. Stole my sax out the car. They broke the little window in the back and they took it out. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, at this point, I was like, nothing else could have gone wrong. I already lost my job. I'm already, I'm
Carless.
hustling, car going, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, but then a good Samaritan calls me at 6 o'clock in the morning and says, hey, Josh, I found your saxophone. Is this you? And by the grace of God, one of the things I told myself, I was like, I'm never going to go to another gig and not have a business card. So literally everywhere I was playing that summer, I always made sure I had my business cards
Mhm.
because you
People
never
wanna
know.
know, yeah.
And so literally to get my saxophone, literally like back the day after, like untouched, unblemished, like that day showed me, I was like, yo, the thing that I thought that, you know, maybe wasn't for me or that I needed to be more realistic about, even before I got started, was the thing that God returned to me.
Yeah.
And you know the old saying, if something comes back to you, that
Right.
means it's meant for you. And so at that moment, I was like, I'm like, I'm not gonna give up. Like I'm gonna bend. I know it's not gonna be easy, but I'm not gonna break.
That's
And I know I was kind of long, but I was
no,
like,
but
that's
that that story gives, uh, I guess what I want to say, a real undertone to understanding what it's like to be on a journey and then have crashed
Yeah,
on the journey and feel like, well, since I've crashed, then it's over. Versus, well, now you just gotta walk. And then on your while you're walking, someone comes to pick you up and then take you to the next point. And then in the next point, someone gives you a card to get to the next point. It just kind of gradually grows. It's kind of like you have to be tested
exactly.
first to see if you really want it. And I say all the time, like, you got to pass the test to see if you really want it.
Yeah, man.
So yeah, man, that's pretty substantial. I do want to get into your show that you've been producing, which is Taste and Trouble,
Word.
correct?
Okay. Yeah. Yes, sir.
And let's tell me a little bit about tell people about that.
Yeah, man. So Taste and Trouble is like my baby, man. For me, well, let me give you a backstory of actually what Taste and Trouble is. So Taste and Trouble is a series where we bring both creative musical artists and creative private chefs from all over Los Angeles as of right now. We definitely gonna, definitely gonna expand in the future, but we bring artists and chefs together to what I like to call the ultimate playlist on a plate for your ears and your taste buds. So we specialize in creating amazing content by taking what makes an artist special, their newest song, and everything about them that makes them dope, and turning it into culinary art. So, Keith, let me ask you a question. Like, who's one of your favorite artists?
Lil Wayne.
All right, Lil Wayne. So, what's one of your favorite tracks? And you know he got mad, but you got
Right.
mad tracks, bro.
Bill Gates.
Bill Gates. Okay, give me one more.
Uh let me see. God, where do I go? I gotta say swag surfing.
Swag surfing. Okay, so if I offered you the opportunity to see Lil Wayne perform and you could taste what swag surfing is all about on a plate, how would that make you feel?
I'd be interested because I'm like, yo, what does that mean? Like, what? Nah, it definitely sparks interest, right? Because
Yeah.
now I've never actually even created that thought in
Mm.
my brain. I've never had that thought pattern. So yeah.
Exactly. That's literally like what we do because music and food are always in the same space, but what you
Mm.
rarely see is them having a conversation. Everybody loves going to the brunch parties and turning up with the mimosas and the chicken and waffles and all of that. But you have to understand that both artists and both, musicians and singers, that they are storytellers at the same
Brunch
time.
doesn't exist without music. Brunch doesn't exist without food.
Exactly.
You can't have one or the other. You got to have
Exactly.
both.
These are universal languages that we're bringing together. So one of the things that we do on our show is we give just the chef and the artist an opportunity to collaborate together to be able to create a conversation about music, about the journey, and their ingredients for success. And it's been a beautiful ride, man. It's been my baby. We started in 2020, literally in the middle of my apartment because the world was shut down and obviously the restaurant industry was suffering and it's still trying to recover. Obviously, everybody was having to move towards digital content. It was literally like the digital renaissance, like really
Right, for
took
sure.
place in 2020 because everybody needed to get their brand and their audience and their ideas in front of the camera. So
Right.
I was like, what does it look like? Just to be able to bring in people from my network that I know to be able to highlight their brands and what they're doing, and it's been an amazing experience. We were able to do, a 5 episode first season. I mean, everything from, artists that are from North Carolina, here, artists from here in LA, are chefs that have, been on Food Network, chefs that have their own, the wine brands or have been, the top chef for, 5-star restaurants. Like all of these different roses that have grown from concrete that you would never know unless you go to an actual place and like actually ask to speak to the head chef or actually ask to speak to the person that owns that brand. And it's beautiful just seeing just the I would say the gumbo that we've been kind of like been able to like just really cook up and just see the intentionality and creativity behind it.
Let me tell you something right now, man. I'm fasting for 10 days.
Woo!
And gumbo is my favorite food, man. I ain't gonna lie, man. You just got to look. I have to wipe my mouth a little bit, man. As you talking, I'm like, you know, but I want to tell me, go. I want a little more in depth of that. Like, what kind of meals have been created?
Oh man, bro, if I go back, I'm gonna have to listen. And
I
you
don't even know that
definitely,
should be
you
asking
got
you
it.
this right now. I
You,
might have to put myself
no,
on mute
you
and let you
good. You
answer.
you definitely got to check out some of the things we created. So I think one of the most interesting dishes that we had was a jerk shrimp pasta that was good.
Oh,
That
that
was
sounds
created by
crazy.
my good friend
Oh
Chef
my
Janine and
God.
her brand Till the Last Bite. So we got her and my good friend TJ Wilkins, who also went to CSUN. You know TJ.
Yes.
Yeah, so amazing, amazing singer. Has toured with the
Yeah.
Jacksons. I
Yeah,
mean,
he
performed
is.
with student Stevie Wonder. Just been all around, all around the world, man. Amazing vocalist, and we got them together, and he came out with a song called "Good to You." And when you listen to that song, and mind you, it's on all platforms, so please, check out TJ Wilkins' "Good to You." When I first heard the track, I was just like, "Yo, this is like the spitting image of like Marvin Gaye." Like
Mm.
with that track, and it's a soulful record. And I think a lot of times we forget that the energy that comes from music, as well as the lyrics, that they're putting out a certain frequency. So it matters to actually like listen to the lyrics of what you're hearing, because it could be good, it could be bad. You know what I'm saying? But
Yeah.
in this situation, it was absolutely amazing. So we got them together. I had met Chef Janine at another event I had done, and she created this jerk shrimp pasta from scratch, man. I mean, when I tell you, and it's different when you're
All right,
tasting it.
I can't. Just move on to the next dish, bro. Move on to what else? What else we got? I just
Okay, I got you. I got you. Okay.
oh my God.
Okay. So,
I'm stressing over here.
bruh, so all right, check this out. So, my good friend B Arch, so his brother Braulio is my frat brother. So he has a brand called Stuffed LA, and he has the original, like the OG original recipe for stuffed pancakes. And
Wow.
I cannot share what his recipe is because he'd kill me
Oh.
if he do. But we got him and my boy Trev Deshawn, who's a well-known
Oh
just
yeah, you
say
about to wrap
entrepreneur.
this up,
Yeah,
man, because
bro.
I'm over here getting honest.
No, you good, you good.
I'm over here
He's a one
hungry.
awesome, but I mean,
Yeah.
bruh, like I mean, what's cool about it is it's like we got to interview,
Yeah.
someone who started, just on his block, just providing, just great breakfast foods and great brunch foods for the people in his,
Right.
for the people in his
And
area. And
I just
so,
want to make this clear. So
yeah,
so you're interviewing these people as they are preparing the dish,
correct.
correct? And you're having conversation around that. Where does the music come in?
So where the music comes in is that these dishes are curated from these tracks. So that's the music. So as you are actually seeing these dishes being made in real time when you're watching the episodes, you're also hearing the music underneath. And while the artist is explaining, how they even thought about coming up with the song. And then
Right.
also like you're listening to the chef's their perspective and their interpretation
So
of the
so
song.
they make a meal based on how they feel from the song.
Yes.
Hmm. What have you ever had any challenge? You ever had some challenges like where like chefs like, nah, I can't really make nothing to that.
No, to be honest, no, we haven't had that challenge yet. But I think that that's where the beauty is. Is the fact is like it creates the challenge for them. To really dig deep as far as just instead of just putting something together. Really just thinking about the intentionality behind the ingredients. You know what I'm saying?
Honestly, it's an incredible concept.
Thank
Like
you.
which and like I said, I've never, and that's my bad for not watching an episode prior, but I've seen clips of what you posted.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
I've gotten a glimpse, which is that's how we all really do it now. But I've gotten glimpse, and I'm like, yo, I've seen them like, yo, this is a good ass idea. You know what I mean? So, what's the goal with Tasting Trouble? Do you have a goal? You have a plan with that?
Yeah, man. My goal is, to continue, providing, just, amazing, quality content, for, local businesses, and for artists that are, here in LA, just because, you know, yeah, we have people that, can get a camera and, create some content, but I think it's important that we share these stories, especially for us that are, people of color, people who look like us. We're fighting for equality and equity at the same time, and in both these industries that are both universal languages, you got to really take a shot in the dark and hope that it sticks, like to actually make it. Like when you see all the businesses that didn't come back, because of COVID, those are dreams, and those are ideas, and family businesses that are having to restart and pick up the pieces. So I feel like the more just coverage and the more creativity that we are bringing within these industries allow a lot of equitable conversations to be had. So ultimately, my goal is, to create some, some great pop-ups, to be able to expand outside of Los Angeles, and to be able to, curate a space, just where flavor, sound, and culture and diversity can just, all be in one space.
And you're on season 3?
We're on season 2 right
Season
now.
2.
Yeah, so we just did episode 1 in February for Black History Month with my good friend Dynasty. She's an amazing, soul and soul R&B and hip hop lyricist from Queens, New York. And that was actually really fun. Her and bringing in my boy Chef Mike, who's from LA. So we had like an East Coast meets West Coast kind of vibe
Right,
on that
nice.
episode.
Where would people find this Taste and Trouble if they were looking?
You can find us on YouTube, www.youtube.com/taste and trouble. And you can also find us on Instagram at taste and trouble and at tasteandtrouble.com.
What's your favorite episode that you've done so far?
Ooh, I would have to say my favorite episode was really honestly, all of them were my
Nope,
favorite.
give me
I
one. Give
can't,
me
man,
one. I know you don't want to fit nobody, but I
would
need
have
one.
to say, I have to say, I have to say my finale episode with Tia P. She's a good friend of she's a good friend of mine. She's an Inglewood native.
Whoa.
And what was really fun about that one is just because we really were able to have an in-depth conversation just about her as an artist, her being, going to an HBCU, finding, just finding her roots within music, but also just like who she is, just as, as an artist, but also, paving her path within, sync and TV. Like most people would not know, but like a lot of new shows that are coming out right now, like sync licensing and getting your music heard on networks and series is
That's
like
where
a
it's at.
big thing right now.
Shout out Vince Staples. He mastered that.
And she is also one of the, she calls herself the queen of sync. I'm literally every new post every week she's getting another one, like
Placement.
DJ Khaled, another placement. And it's because she is extremely intentional just about her craft. She has a great team behind her. Her dad is, manages her career, and he is a great, he's a great guy. So, I think it's just beautiful, just to be able to highlight, especially people from LA, specifically from LA, where everybody comes through. This is really the melting pot. We are the trendsetters out here in LA.
For sure.
And I think that was my favorite episode, just because we got to do a behind the scenes kind of vibe to it, and it was the first official pop up that we did with a private audience, and that was really cool.
Nice. Man, I'm gonna go. Now I'm more interested. You know what I'm saying? And watch because I got a little background.
Yeah.
But one, I want to thank you for hanging out with me today, man, and being vulnerable, telling us about your background, your story, and about your path to success, man, as a professional musician and specifically saxophonist. Like I said, I think that you're a rare breed. There's not many people who I can say. I know a lot of people, bro, halfway around the world. I mean, God, and you may be the only saxophonist I know. You know what I'm saying? So that says a lot. And my question for you I would have is, if this was your last day, which is not, but if it was, because we all have one, what's the message you want to leave for people watching, listening, loved ones?
Ooh, that's a good one. That is a good one. I need like maybe like.
Go ahead, man. Get a second, because the reason why I asked this question, because there's two things that happen in life. Life is either short or super short. And not only that, the day you're born, you sign a contract to die. So I think it's important that we embrace it versus try to steer away from it. People say, don't talk about it. Just like, well, no, death is a part of life, literally. So I like to grant the opportunity for people to give that message, because most people don't ever get the opportunity to even think about what they would say.
I would have to say, and I think this, dials in just to what I feel is, just my assignment, just as as a healer through music, but to also encourage people, what you think is your impossible is God's best possible for your life. Everything, that, we attempt to do, we're already operating, in the finished work, because we because everything that we do comes from the great creator anyway. It comes from some source. Energy is not created or destroyed, so it comes from somewhere. And so what you think is impossible, the fact that you did it already disproves the fact that that it's possible. The fact that you even attempted. And when you fail, it's not that you failed, it's really just a finding about just how to do something different.
Like that.
So that's truly what I would say. It's like, what you believe is impossible is God's blessed possible for your life. And more importantly, if you separate I am impossible and you just create that space and you just put God in the middle of that, I'm possible. There you go.
No, that's wonderful, man, and beautiful. And like I said, I agree with you. I agree with you. This whole life experience is one of a kind, literally, because you only get one for as far as we know. And and it's good to take as many chances as you can. And what I always say is that I'd rather die with disappointment than regret. So
Every time.
every time,
Every
right?
time.
So man, I'd like to thank you again for coming through, man, having a conversation with me and being vulnerable and sharing your story. Because I think people who watch this, they may already know you, but
Mhm.
they ain't know you like they know you now. Because I got to learn more about you, your history and your background, and it lets me in on who you are as an individual. And now my appreciation for you has grown. It's already at a high, but it has grown tremendously from this conversation with you.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. Keith, we've been rocking for years, man. So I'm like I said, you caught me off guard today, but I appreciate you, just welcoming me, to your platform and just seeing just how you are growing your space to be able to, just create more of those authentic moments. And I also ask those questions that people would not normally ask, but really getting people to think, so that we can just have, just more time to just reflect on who we actually meet. Because you always hear you never know who you're sitting next to. So
Right.
that's what these, moments are being curated for. I appreciate you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you've just been introduced. What you may know him as Josh Thompson, but he is really known as J Quality, and it's not J Quality, like he'd tell you.
Thank
Professional musician and saxophone player and digital producer. Appreciate you, my brother.
you.